Lars Horsholt Jensen from Food and Bio Cluster Denmark. He will present and discuss. Will also be presenting as well as moderating in this webinar. So a full agenda. We will be looking at business models, and we will discuss also the Digital Innovation Hub services. Then we move on to a little bit more complexity, the multi-sidedness of a Digital Innovation Hub business model, as well as a look at network effects. Then the third part will be about agri-food digital innovation hubs and a path to sustainability, and also considering willingness to pay schemes. The fourth bit is about indeed the food and bio cluster of Denmark, and let's go. Kristina, please take the word.
Thank you. Before we move on, I have to mention a little bit more administrative rules, but please, the webinar is going to be recorded. We are going to send the presentations to you after the event. Please stay muted unless you're speaking, of course, and just to keep the webinar running smoothly, please also turn off your camera unless you're presenting or talking, and leave your questions in the chat so that we can address them after the presentations in a complete order. Thank you for that, and I would now move to what is a business model and connection to the Digital Innovation Hubs. You have heard parts of the story about the Digital Innovation Hubs in previous webinars. So in approximately a year ago, there was a webinar by Maurits Butter who discussed how to set up a Digital Innovation Hub. We have talked about strategies for the Digital Innovation Hubs. All these elements are, of course, relevant, but here we want to bring the picture together and really discuss the business model as a whole. A lot of what I'm going to say in the introduction is, of course, based on a lot of previous knowledge. Business modeling has been a field of research for many years, and specifically for public-private partnerships and digital innovation hubs, also projects such as EU-GREAT and Access to I4MS have worked on that, and many more others. Let's be clear on that. So before we start talking about what is a business model, it is a short recap. What is the value of a digital innovation hub? Because you cannot have a business model without actually having a good idea of what value you bring to your clients. So very often digital innovation hubs are multi-partner organizations, you know, as one of them, and as such you're connecting technology, business, ecosystem views, and this connection of different mindsets is quite important. It provides actually 360-degree overview of how farmers or companies could then benefit from digital transformation. Working in a digital innovation hub in such a partnership, you're reducing uncertainty by providing expertise or access to expertise if it's not available in a specific topic in the digital innovation hub, but probably somebody in your ecosystem does it. Possibilities to test and consult on technologies, businesses, and skills. This is one of the, I would say, core benefits from a digital innovation hub, and of course sharing access to equipment and costs for developing such equipment, which could be actually quite high. Just as a point of view, the development of the local ecosystem is a priority usually for the digital innovation hubs because it leads to more dynamic ecosystem, to more competitiveness, and to support of all of the partners, therefore providing benefits for all. And very often the digital innovation hubs connect the demand and supply in the network. So it is, you can imagine it as demand from farmers about digital solutions and, for example, IT developers who might provide that. So why is the business model important, and why are we talking about this here? The business model actually describes the business logic of the Digital Innovation Hub itself. This is a quite a broad statement, but it cuts towards the core. It connects the dots to explain what you're offering, to whom are you offering it, How are you creating the value to the particular customer? Because they might be different. They might be a farmer, they might be an IT developer, or they might actually be a general public who is willing to find a little bit more. And also very importantly, how you generate profit for your digital innovation hub. I also wanted to distinguish between business models and strategy development, and I found this useful article in the Harvard Business Review, which basically makes a very simple, I would say, but clear distinction. And I want to highlight this because these concepts are often confused and bundled together, and it's important to separate them so that we can really discuss them in detail. So a business model is a description of how your business runs, but the strategy explains how you will do this better than the rivals. So in this presentation, we focus about how your business runs. And to make it more concrete, how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. So when talking about creating value, digital innovation hubs, in our view, create value by providing various services. And I already mentioned the complementarity between business and technology expertise. And here you see it as well. We have talked about the services of the digital innovation hubs, but this complementarity of different services is a way to add value to already existing opportunities that might be offered by only one partner. So looking at this with the technology services, we often see that the digital innovation hubs start with them, but they quickly expand to business support so that they can help the whole ecosystem. The business services actually create the impact for the SMEs and the farmers. They help identify options, develop the value propositions, and actually transform technology into a business, which is not as easy as it sounds usually. Of course, we have the ecosystem services, and the ecosystem services, the interesting part is that they generate new business for the digital innovation hubs and could be seen as such. So think of them as a marketing tool as well. So you're in the ecosystem while you're building awareness and interest towards particular solutions, you're also generating interest for your digital innovation hub. And the ecosystem of the digital innovation hub is an asset by itself, but it also incorporates many of the assets of the digital innovation hub. So many of the partners, for example, that are part of the local ecosystem. The skills are becoming increasingly important for everybody, and therefore they can create a lot of value for the ecosystem, and they can also provide connection to training providers in the region. Now, when we're talking about capturing of value, we're talking about revenue models. The revenue models are often quite difficult or forgotten to assess, but the revenue model typology presented in the picture on the right, you can see, I think provides a good overview. So it goes from what are you paying for, what is being paid for, how is it paid, how much, and who pays for it. These are quite a lot of elements that should be considered, and we are not going to go into detail in all of them. And that's because the Digital Innovation Hub might have a lot of different customers. Therefore, for each of the customers, you have to answer how much and for what are they willing to pay. And that is a question that you would need to go through for each of the services as well. But as an inspiration, I went through a few of the revenue models that are out there, and what I did is Google some revenue models and consider which ones are actually useful for a digital innovation hub. You could see that membership and subscription are very often mentioned and could be very relevant for the digital innovation hub. So partners from your ecosystem who are interested in your services pay a small membership in order to receive then some benefits, whether it is market analysis or whether it is webinars or whether it is knowledge from the policy field. freemiums, providing some free services with add-ons later on that you're going to see for specific parts. So for example, if you're offering market research about the agriculture sector in your country, you can offer an executive summary for free and ask for some small payment for the full report. Pay-per-use service, for example, for infrastructure, to use it for the testing, asset sharing, success fees. So if a brokerage, for example, has been provided successfully, that you pay a fee for that, commission, and so on and so forth. What I want to say here is that this is not an exhaustive list. There are very many other revenue models that should be there, but each of the digital innovation hubs, based on their own situation, should go through the questions: for what are people paying, how much, and what is actually paid. Is it money? Is it in kind? Is it a contribution? And so forth. And this is just almost a wrap up for me. Please pay attention to the fact that digital innovation hubs often also fulfill public role, in the sense that they're addressing a market failure. As such, some of the services that you might offer might not generate income from the particular services. Therefore, you might need an additional funding options, and these could be public funding from a national or regional source, subsidies, grants, taxations, benefits, etc. But please know that these are very much related to a market failure. Therefore, they're not for everything. But you could also have private funding, the revenues that we mentioned, but also maybe some investments from industrial partners, for example, with infrastructure, or from the partners of the Digital Innovation Hub itself. In-kind contribution, time, effort from the partners of the Digital Innovation Hub. Please take these into account. They should not be taken for granted, because in the beginning, especially of the development of a Digital Innovation Hub, they might play a pretty big role. So, looking into that, I'm now going to move to Frank, who is actually going to present more into a detail, a multi-sided business model for a Digital Innovation Hub. Frank?
Thank you very much, Kristina. You can move on to the next slide. Yes, this is the well-known business model canvas, and basically most things that Kristina has mentioned can be interpreted in the way of a business model and a business model canvas. However, thank you. The Digital Innovation Hub is, in my view, about servicing by and for the ecosystem. With that, I mean that the services that Kristina talked about are not always delivered by the people in the Digital Innovation Hub, usually by other partners in the ecosystem, and of course for the benefit and usage within that same ecosystem. So it's really the core role of the Digital Innovation Hub to orchestrate all of that service delivery, because all of these innovation services add value to promoting innovations towards usage at the farmers end in the end. So that's the delicate perspective I want to give to you. This is the servicing by and for the ecosystem. Please, for the next slide, Kristina. And if you really look at that, this is the category called multi-sided business models. If you look at that, we can distinguish three major segments on the usage and co-production in the Digital Innovation Hub business model. Eventually, this is all meant to be taken up and used by the agri-users or the farmers in the end. And this is why we are engaging in this Digital Innovation Hub. So that's the main focus on the right here. The circle before that we call Agri Innovator. This is the set of organizations that is actually delivering services, delivering equipment, delivering support and advice to the Agri users. And the circle before that is basically the group of organizations that is actually developing new innovations, new technologies, new services that can be brought, say, to the market, to the Agri users by the Agri innovators. And the Digital Innovation Hub is basically coordinating this transfer between these organizations. And also please know that organizations do not typically reside in only one of the three circles, but sometimes can also be two. Okay, so we have three different segments, and what is really interesting, I think, is that we have network effects between these. So the more Agri users are linked to the Digital Innovation Hub, the more interesting it becomes for Agri innovators to also link to the Digital Innovation Hub. And the more Agri innovators link to the Digital Innovation Hub, the more interesting it is for Agri innovation suppliers. And the wealthier the innovation supply is, the more interesting it is for Agri innovators to link to the digital platform. And the better the total supply is and interoperability between services and technologies, the more attractive it is for Agri users to link to the Digital Innovation Hub. So these are mutual effects between the different groups of participants. And it's really your challenge to create a critical mass in these three. And this is what is really the different, the complex endeavor of your type of business model. So a multi-sided business model. I indicated here the head with the, oh, I'm sorry, one go back, please. Yes, I indicated here the head with the plant in it, just to emphasize that this is a really a mindset shift from the linear type of business models many of us are used to. This is really about coordinating, managing the network effects in your ecosystem. That is the highest level of business logic that applies to the Digital Innovation Hub. So that has a number of implications, and I listed them on this slide. Please go back one more slide, Kristina. This is a lengthy one. So that is a shift from, say, acquiring projects to matchmaking and facilitating that projects are being developed and being executed. This is more about transactions thinking. So who delivers value to whom, and can I, as a Digital Innovation Hub, enable that? I can already think ahead and see what is needed in the next step of the innovation path. So we're doing testing now. I can already see that the SME and the university are in need of a new business model and financing options. That's the next step in the innovation. What can I do now to pave that path towards impact at the farmer's end? It's about critical mass and then expanding. So attracting for these three circles enough participation. In one of the previous webinars, we talked about mapping your ecosystem, and this is really where this can be used. Okay, do I have enough substantial enough participants from these three circles in all of these areas? It's not a linear business model, meaning that it's about not what you buy and transform and sell. It's about how many transactions you can facilitate in your ecosystem. And one intricate question is, how can you use your partners' in-kind capabilities? So for instance, when you are providing for, let's say, a training, and you have agri innovators in the virtual classroom, what can you learn from them? For instance, what are their most important needs, which you can help to create new innovations or new roadmaps with the universities and RTOs and high schools and other types of organizations, and vice versa. So how can you get in-kind value that you can deliver to another part in the segment? How do you learn? How does all this transaction, all this innovation lead you to become an innovation and ecosystem expert? You are the go-to person when it comes to understanding your ecosystem, the needs and the capabilities. So how do you learn from each single project? And this increases the uniqueness. Okay, Kristina, next slide, please. In order to help you establish network effects, we compiled the 5 C's checklist. It's based on existing material, but I try to interpret it in context of the Digital Innovation Hub. The first C is how can you increase the number of connections, the number of organizations that you have relations to. So the starting basis is, of course, this ecosystem analysis. How much do I have? How much relationships do I have with this specific segment? Linking mechanisms. In that ecosystem webinar, I introduced a number of linking mechanisms, way of interacting with different organizations. For instance, internships is a different type of linking mechanism than a cooperation agreement, etc. There's a huge number of different ways to linking organizations. You can increase this number, for instance, also by organizing hackathons, in which you invite new type of organizations and they get relationships with you. How can you increase the communication? Okay, this is really about leveraging your brand, understanding that what you do is organizing the ecosystem. So you need your participants to provide word of mouth and co-branding, free publicity. So it's about brand value powered by your Digital Innovation Hub. And that makes the spider in the web really reoccur. How can you increase the collaboration? Try to expand the running projects. Think about the next step. Pricing, you can deal with prices. Ask in-kind returns. We just discussed this. So in-kind returns, I think, are a very, very powerful way of leveraging the ecosystem. How can you apply curation? So what is curation? That is actually not just doing all type of innovation, but create focus on what you want to achieve as a Digital Innovation Hub, what you want to achieve with your ecosystem. So that means proactive advice. You should be considering this direction to co-develop roadmaps. So where are we going together? What do we want to achieve? And this is also a community endeavor to create these roadmaps. Adopt the regional policy. So typically in a region, there are governments that set out regional policies. You can adopt them and try to leverage that. And also this should be linked to your brand and your mission. How can you enhance community? So co-create these ecosystem services, the red ones that Kristina already mentioned, create these newsletters, create get-togethers, share information. So this all in combination with this branding creates a community. So 5 C's as a checklist for you to help you think about establishing these network effects, which are the key challenge for you as a Digital Innovation Hub to achieve.
Thank you, Frank. And Ahmad, would you like to continue with the Digital Innovation Hubs in the agri-food sector and their path to sustainability?
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Next slide. So as Kristina and Frank has mentioned already, the DIHs serve multiple purposes and provide services that are mixes of public and private nature. A common way to organize the funding of digital innovation hubs could be therefore to use a hybrid business model that combine public and private financing sources. Previous analysis of existing digital innovation hubs suggest that for most hubs, the base funding comes from public sources to cover, for instance, offices, test infrastructure, equipment, and part of the salaries for the personnel. And to some extent, there are membership fees of digital innovation hubs that cover the rest. In some cases, beneficiaries pay to receive certain services, while other sources could be used to fund or subsidize development projects. Sustainability for digital innovation hubs involves what we call the matching and balancing between two separate matrices. In one dimension, there is the service matrix, so the set of services offered by the digital innovation hubs to its customers or potential customers that spans from awareness raising, hands-on market consultancy, the types of services that Kristina already mentioned. On the other axis is the funding matrix, the set of available funding schemes and routes through which the activities may be financed. Each service offering needs to have an underlying revenue stream and cost structure, whether the revenue is coming from public or private, and therefore each service can have its own business model for how it's going to be delivered. There will be a difference between what the customers are willing to pay for, either as clients or suppliers, and what the public agencies or public funding are willing to support through grants and other schemes. Of course, these conditions might change over time. In essence, the digital innovation hubs support the whole innovation chain, from the ideation proof of concept to full market introduction and market expansion, in order to serve the different types of customers with distinct services over varying time frames. The hubs need to follow what we call a funnel approach. At the top or the mouth of the funnel, the services and activities may be generalized and should aim to take a general offering to a broad audience. As customers move through the funnel, the services offered by the hub become more focused and customized until at the most advanced level, the bottom of the funnel, the market introduction and expansion, the service offering is usually entirely bespoke. The sustainability can be considered as an emergent property that arises from the summation of the viability of all the digital innovation hubs services. Viability here doesn't mean necessarily profitability. So some of the services generally at the top or the mouth of the funnel will be what we call loss leaders, where others towards the neck of the funnel at the bottom should be highly profitable. Given the multi-sided nature of the hub activities, as Frank explained, generalized services are essential to the overall offering, even if they need to be subsidized, because they help activate the potential clients and stimulate the demand for the downstream revenue generating services. So all digital innovation hubs, whether they are new or already mature and established, need to think about how to weave this work basically. How will they combine the different service lines and revenue stream in a way that is financially viable and also creates a business funnel that is credible for their clients? Next slide, please. So if we look at what customers are willing to pay for, a survey has been already conducted in different types of sectors in Europe. And as you can see here, different types of customers said that they are willing to pay for different types of services. The items in this figure that they are in white signify the most attractive offering from the services point of view. The items that are struck through in red indicate offerings for which this particular customer group would be unwilling to pay for. Next slide, please. So this is the first matrix we were talking about, the services matrix. However, we need to look into also the funding one. So the management of the various funding layers and funding levels is in itself a very important element in the overall success of the sustainability of the digital innovation hubs. So regional, national, European private funding has to be financed across the portfolio and managed over time. So in order to exploit the synergies, the complementaries in each scheme rules and conditions, and sometimes for digital innovation hubs, there might be some opportunities to leverage one funding stream against another to adopt a collaborative funding to cover the costs of different service delivery. Next one, please. The working group of Alliance for Internet of Things Innovation, IoT in Europe, they have a working group in smart farming and food security, and they have conducted a survey to get insights about the funding aspects of the activities developed by digital innovation hubs in the agriculture and food domain. This figure illustrates the answers provided regarding the funding sources identified by the respondent digital innovation hubs. Some observations from this, it's interesting to note that all operational digital innovation hubs, except in the case of 2 respondents, resort or expect to have multiple funding sources. One of these 2 exceptions was funded by a telco operator. The majority of respondents declare a combination of public and private funding sources, and there is a strong dependence on Horizon 2020 funding in order to establish the digital innovation hubs. Only a small portion of the respondents identify ERDF, for instance, or EAFDR, the specific one to agri-food and rural development, as suitable funding sources. Regular payment of fees by digital innovation hubs members is seen also as an option in some cases. Next slide, please. This figure shows the respondents, the results of responding regarding the services offered by the digital innovation hubs, along with the actual or envisaged funding mechanisms. So the vast majority of answers show that the preferred funding scheme is a combination of public and private funding. Interestingly, there's a common understanding that certain services such as skills in education, community building, for instance, should not be subject to the availability of private funding. And this is the view of the digital innovation hubs themselves. As we can see from the results, none of the respondents identified in this case private funding solely as an option. On the other hand, the services that are more susceptible to being privately funded are contract research and testing and validation. In the next slide, we look at the customer's perspectives. What are they willing to pay for? So basically, this figure shows the demand of each service according to the service consumers participating in the survey. All services are seen as highly relevant, and this, especially those dealing with business and ecosystem building, and this confirms the views of the Digital Innovation Hubs. In line with the previous one, skills and education are seen as services which should not be subject to the availability of private funding. The same is observed for incubator accelerator support and provision of technology infrastructure. Interestingly here, opposed to the results in the previous figure, the service consumers understand that access to finance, for instance, should be covered primarily with their own private funds, or at least via a mixed model, supported by public funding, but not relying solely on it. And this different view between what the Digital Innovation Hubs think and what their consumers are willing to pay for is very interesting. What we suggest that it's very important for you as Digital Innovation Hubs to test your offerings and assumptions about the funding mechanisms and your business model against your customers. And this will validate your business model and help you in your path to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. I know that we have put a lot of terms and concepts towards the public, and you're going to have the slides to go through them, but business models, services, revenue models, financing, multi-sided network effects, have a look at them later on. And now to put this into really concrete terms, we would like to hear from Lars, who is actually going to present the business model of the food and bio cluster. Lars?
Thank you very much, Kristina, and thank you for this opportunity to present. Just a few words on what Food and Bio Cluster Denmark is. In fact, we have recently been formed just this year as a merger of 4 different organizations working on clustering within Denmark, and have been named the national cluster for food and bioeconomy within Denmark going forward. So we are 36 people. We are in 6 sites across Denmark. We have incubators in 3 of our sites where we handle startups. We have an ongoing project portfolio of somewhat around 140–150 million euros, and we annually do more than 100 events. So webinars is part of what we do, also in our own context with the pandemic ongoing at the moment. Actually, I think we're going to reach well above 150 events this year, since webinars are shorter and more concise, as you'll also experience here today. But we are getting a lot of information through this type of events, and so hopefully a few questions at the end, or a few comments at the end, or even during my presentation through the chat would be very, very welcome. Next slide, please, Kristina. So listening to the presentations of Kristina, first of all, saying that most digital innovation hubs starts from technology and then builds out to business and to ecosystem services. We're actually a little bit an inverted digital innovation hub, since we are an ecosystem building organization first and foremost. So we have a number of members, some listed here, from large companies to small companies to universities and organizations. So that, I think that means a lot going forward into how we are developing our business model as a digital innovation hub, that we in fact are already an ecosystem provider and an ecosystem developer. And then business services are actually at the core of what we do, which I will look into furthermore a little later. So our sort of core value proposition is that we do innovation and business development with an industry-specific experience and industry-specific competence. And we do that within an ecosystem where we already have trust and network built to, first of all, these 300 members, which are at a very early stage where we are at the moment, expanding into the whole ecosystem with thousands of companies. So technology is really the last thing we do. One of our strategic focus areas, and thank you very much for this, this slide. One of our strategic focus areas, just going into this, is the application of technology and how that drives the industry forward, looking at the food and bio industry. And here I just wanted to highlight that being a cluster organization, this is part of what we do. Integrating and working with applying technology in the sector, into the cluster, into the ecosystem that we're working with. So that is very much part of what we do, and I think that's also important, thinking about how we do it. So next slide, please. So looking at how we engage with companies. Here it's important to say our target group is mainly our SME members, but also SMEs in our cluster, in our ecosystem in general. What we do is basically this funnel process, and I'm going to spend a little time on going through this, but this is just how our process looks overall. The initial part of what we do is basically going through a process where we screen, we try to find solutions, we validate, and we take action. That is the core of the process that we run through as a digital innovation hub, or really, when you think about it, in any innovation activity that we do with our SME members. So basically what we do is we go through a screening process, which is a meeting where we understand the business of the SME. I'll come back to this. Then we do innovation workshops, we do a validation stage, and then we go into the action phase where we actually design the specific technology project, in the case of digitalization, that we want to embark upon. And I want to explain a little bit about the approach to this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is really important for us is that we have a business-centric approach. So when we talk about business modeling and talking about this, the offset of any service we provide as a digital innovation hub or as a cluster as such takes an offset in the business of the company. And here, understanding the business model, but also the business strategy, referring to Kristina's earlier distinction between those two things. So both understanding how the business runs, but also what are the core components that make this business competitive in relation to its competitors. So that is where it starts. Because technology, while it is a part of driving, affecting, altering business models, it's not a standalone. It's not something that starts in product development or IT department, because it needs to be connected to the way we make money, to the way we understand our business and the way we compete. So we're very much starting from basically from the offset at an ecosystem level, connecting to SMEs, meeting up with them, understanding how their business works and how that integrates, and then talking about the challenges or potentials that they have and turning that into digital opportunities. Next slide, please. So here you see, and I apologize, this is in Danish, but that's also a little bit because I want the company to be anonymous. But this is basically a way that we're working with this. You see, it's the classical business model canvas. This could be the output of the very first screening session. So looking at understanding the business model, so in green, understanding the different components that goes into this particular business model. And then the orange dot represents those possible thematic areas where we have some potential or we have some issues. For this particular example, it's a company implementing digital solutions into implements. So it's an equipment provider into the agricultural industry. So they're looking at how they can use different types of sensors, different types of digital solutions to enhancing their business. So the first step is very much talking about how does that integrate? What types of solutions are important to provide you with the competitive edge? So what is really the core value proposition of what you have today? How does that translate into your customer, to your VP value proposition, customer fit? and how can we enhance that, or how can we open up new markets to you? So in this case, we were talking very much about that they have a very high-tech solution, but one of the issues they were facing was the customer experience, or the comfort of the customer in dealing with this technology, while it was innovative, that was somewhat different from what they were experiencing at the moment. So what we worked on in a digital setting is one potential area of interest could be to work with the customer experience and to try to digitally enhance the sense of comfort or recognizability across the different solutions that they had. So that was one of the areas that we dove into, apart from just developing new functionalities or maybe validating performance, looking at how the customer experienced that. So next slide, please. So just to explain a little bit about the format, because I think it's important when we dive into how we do this, how is our business model surrounding this? So basically, the different formats to the right on your screen is basically the first meeting is a 2 to 3 hour meeting that we do on site with the management team of the company. So simply unfolding the business and looking at that. The next step is innovation workshops. So we have translated this into some thematic areas where we need to focus. So we try to unbox that, and that might be 1 or 2 workshops, depending on whether it's 1, 2, 3 different themes. At this stage, we utilize the fact that we are a cluster. So as we're talking about platform models and using the platform that we stand on already, well, we are not the technological experts. We are, as I said in the beginning, industry-specific expertise. We work with innovation, we work with business modeling and business development, but we have a huge network of potential tech experts and infrastructure that we can bring into play on how to create specific solutions. And then we do, if we continue on, and this is important to say, at each step here, there's a cutoff point. There's a product, that is a small report given to the company, but there's also a cutoff point where they can say, are they creating enough value for me to proceed through this process? If yes, move on to the next. If no, we stop here. And I'll come back to the revenue model on that in a little while. So basically, the next step is basically validation. So getting market feedback, getting verification, and making a decision on which of these different solutions. It might be 3 to 4 different solutions that we're considering within the thematic area, and then moving on to actual project design, road mapping, and execution. Next slide, please. Again, on the right, if you see the way we're thinking about this, well, the first step is that the first discussion is free, and that goes whether you're a member of the cluster organization or whether you're an external party. We see this as a freebie. This is a sales meeting for us. Then we go into the innovation workshops, and depending on how we structure that, and if we need external experts on board to create the different solutions, especially if we need technological experts from the universities or from a private consultancy, the cost might be a little higher, but somewhere in the range of this. Then doing some analysis and some analysis of gaining feedback, maybe going into the market, checking with main consumers or customers whether this solution that we're coming up with is relevant. There might also be some technical verification where we need a second opinion on some of the solutions that are available. And then we go into the specific project. So either it's, and there it really depends on the type of project that we'll be running, as I think Ahmad said earlier. There are also public money available for some of these issues, and there we've tapped into that revenue stream as well. So next slide, please. So I think it's important to say that our DIH model, as I guess many of you as well, is an ongoing development process, and we do this as part of an integrated cluster service model that we do. But just to leave you with some of the highlights that we have here is basically we go to this, as I say, with a business development approach. we go to this as we do as a cluster, as an integrated service within our network. So we basically tap into the fact that we are already a networking organization that operates on a platform model. And that helps us to build the initial trust and the initial relationships that I believe that Frank was also talking about. The 5 C's. How do you create an ecosystem around you? Well, we already have that ecosystem. That's already available to us, and we are already recognized as sort of the core hub of that ecosystem. So that helps us a lot in dealing with the platform model that Frank talked about. And then if you're talking about revenue models, the one that I've explained to you is basically the direct service. So if you're a member, it's a little bit cheaper because you have a lower hourly rate, but it's basically a one-to-one service that we provide as a consultancy. As part of this, we also, of course, see alternative revenue streams going into this. So if we build up those types of relationship with external parties, a natural consequence of working together is that they, again, get a sense of what value we're creating, and then we hopefully can attract them into the cluster as a member, so they become a paying customer regarding all the other services that we have as well. And also, as I said, we have these collaborative projects at the end of the day that might generate a revenue stream either directly to us as a paid service or through different types of public funding schemes where we can have support for technology development, etc. So I think that was basically what I planned to tell you about the example here, but it's important for me to say also I would look very much forward to hearing from any of you on your different models, because we are still building this, of course, from a very specific viewpoint of a cluster, but that I think helps us a little bit in this way. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lars. It was quite interesting, and I'm going to check for questions in a minute. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, you're now developing also the business model, thinking also from the Digital Innovation Hub perspective. Are you operating on the assumption that you're also going to have some public funding, or is this still not in your plans?
I think you were talking about, I think it was Ahmad who talked about hybrid business models. And I think we are that because without what the public in Denmark is willing to pay for is the ecosystem services that we're already providing. So that is very much part of what we do. We can provide some of these services as part of that model. So that allows us to do the free meetings at the beginning and then convert it into membership fees or to consultancy services. But it provides us with the basic funding that allows us to build the ecosystem around us. So that is part of it. And then at the end of the funnel, or so to speak, we have the specific projects, and their public funding can play a part as well, where we have different types of funding schemes from the European level to the national level, supporting innovation. And that is also part of our revenue stream on that side. But in the middle of the funnel, I guess what we also aim for is to create enough value for each individual company that they're willing to pay for those services themselves.
Thank you. That was clear. And just for our background as well, you mentioned that you're comparatively recently established as a whole group of 6 entities. How long have you been offering this combination of services?
Well, basically, this combination of services, we come from an organization where we were maybe 25 people before, with the incubators, also a cluster actor, and we've been active for more than 20 years. So I think that it's this digital innovation hub, or this focus, the strategic focus on digital solutions, which this is coming from, is something that's developed over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe, within our organizations, and then translating into the merger. So I think it's been becoming increasingly more important over the last 5 or 6 years. But we're really using also the SmartAgriHubs project to try to formalize some models working with this.
Thank you, Lars. And we have one question from Lucia as well, which I think is very relevant, and you as a cluster could probably answer very well. But if more than one player in your ecosystem can provide a service, particularly the ones that are on top of the funnel that Ahmad was saying. How do you regulate who provides that service? How do you select which experts do you invite to the webinar and the discussions that you have, for example?
Well, that's it could be a question for both me and Ahmad, I guess. But I'll start since I have the floor already. Yeah. Well, it's a tricky question actually. Being the fact that we are, as you say, a cluster which should treat its knowledge actors or its experts fairly equally. But we have had instances where we invite more than one set of experts to the innovation workshop. So we basically say these are the typical actors that could provide this types of solutions, and then we discuss pros and cons with the company and saying how do we want to do this, and at the end of the day, it's always a choice that the company makes at the end of the day who they partner up with at the bottom of the funnel. But we simply say, okay, how many do we have that could essentially provide this service in our network, and try to discuss that with the company. But ultimately, they make the decision.
Clear. Ahmad, you're also involved in quite a few digital innovation hubs in Germany, so maybe you can also provide your view on that question.
Yes. If you have a very particular service for a particular customer, it's easier to do the matchmaking. However, at the top of the funnel, some of the services, when you have different types of providers, it might create some problems for you, because at the end of the day, you're doing the matchmaking as a digital innovation hub. What we usually do, we test with different service providers, and then we rate the quality of the services provided by those providers, and in the next time we choose based on that. But you need to test. At the beginning, they are on equal ground most of the time, so you go one and the other in depending also on the relationship that you have built with them. There's no black and white answer here. It comes with experience with the delivery of the service from those providers.
Thank you. If somebody else from the participants has dealt with such a question, please speak up. That's always helpful to exchange experiences. And I'm going to give you a second to unmute yourself if you want to say so. And if not, I would very much urge you also to use the SmartAgriHubs forum, for example, where you can exchange information on business models that you are thinking about, and maybe find another digital innovation hub who is using it to help you in development. I think that what Lars mentioned about learning from each other is quite valuable. We saw one example of how it is done in Denmark, but of course, more examples and more models are out there, so please share it here or in the forum. And there is only one more question that I have for Frank. And Frank, if you could quickly mention which are examples of agri-innovators before we close.
Yes, thank you, Kristina. I answered this question in the chat. Typically, there are SMEs that could be, say, hardware or equipment providers or digital service providers. I mentioned a few, typically SMEs, but also can be consultancy and advisory entities. So picking up the knowledge, wrapping it into a service, and delivering it on the end user. That was basically the meaning of that picture. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We're almost out of time, so I would like to thank all of you for participating. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Ahmad, and thank you, Lars, especially for participating and for sharing your experience. I also want to point that there are some materials already available that complement this webinar. So have a look at the Smart AgriHubs portal and also in the IOF webinar of business model challenges. And we hope to hear from you in the future.
Yes, thank you again all for participating in this webinar. I think we made a nice combination of, say, the theoretical view as well as the practical view, and I urge you to learn from this and share your opinion about it as well. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
See you. Bye. Thank you.